When my wife passed away, her wealthy boss called me and said, "Thomas, I found something. Come to my office right now." Then he lowered his voice and added the words that made my blood run cold. "And do not tell your son or your daughter-in-law. You could be in danger." When I got there and saw who was standing at the door, I froze. But before I tell you what I found in that office, let me take you back to the moment my world actually fell apart. Not when Emily died, but when I realized my own son was happy she was gone. I am Thomas, 70 years old, and I have spent my entire life working with wood. As a carpenter, I know how to build things that last. I know how to spot rot before it destroys the foundation, but I never saw the rot growing inside my own family until it was too late. If you have ever trusted someone with your whole heart only to find a knife in your back, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you believe that dignity is worth fighting for. Let me know in the comments which city you are watching from. I read every single one. Now let me tell you how my son tried to bury me along with his mother. The air in the funeral home was thick and suffocating. It smelled of Lily's floor wax and stale coffee. I stood by the open casket looking down at Emily, my wife of 45 years. Her face was pale, waxy, so different from the vibrant woman who used to dance in our kitchen while making Sunday breakfast. I tried to cry, but the tears would not come. I just felt a heavy, cold numbness spreading through my chest. People walked past me, shaking my hand, murmuring words I could barely hear. "Sorry for your loss. She was a good woman. Be strong, Tom." I nodded. I shook hands. I was a statue. My son Adam and his wife Beth were greeting guests near the entrance. Adam looked devastatingly handsome in his black suit, the one I had bought him. Beth was wiping her eyes with a lace handkerchief, looking every bit the grieving daughter-in-law. Everyone whispered about how strong they were, how supportive they were of their poor aging father. I believed it too. At that moment, I would have given my life for them. They were all I had left. The room was getting too hot. I needed water. My throat felt like I had swallowed sawdust. I stepped away from the casket, moving quietly toward the small kitchenette in the back corner of the viewing room. It was separated from the main hall by a heavy velvet curtain and a decorative pillar. As I reached for a paper cup, I heard voices on the other side of the curtain. Familiar voices. But the tone was wrong. It was not the hush of grief. It was sharp, urgent, and impatient. I froze my hand, hovering over the water pitcher. "You have to make sure the old man signs the papers this week," Beth hissed. Her voice was low, but in the quiet corner it cut through the air like a circular saw. "We cannot wait any longer, Adam. We need to do this before the lawyer reads the will." I stopped breathing. "Papers? What papers?" Then I heard my son, my Adam, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man whose college tuition I had paid for by working double shifts in the workshop until my fingers bled. "Don't worry about it, babe," Adam said, and I could hear the dismissal in his tone. "He is a mess. Did you see him? He is practically catatonic. He is a clueless old man when it comes to this stuff. I will put the documents in front of him tomorrow. I will tell him it is for the insurance or the cemetery plot. He will sign whatever I give him. Just let me handle him." Clueless old man. The words hit me harder than a physical blow. I stood there gripping the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. I looked down at my hands. These hands were rough, scarred, and calloused from 50 years of hard labor. These hands had built the house Adam grew up in. These hands had crafted the custom cabinets in the kitchen where Beth cooked. I was not a sophisticated man. I did not wear Italian suits or drive a luxury car like my son. But I was not stupid. I built a business from nothing. I calculated measurements to the millimeter. I negotiated contracts. I knew the value of a hard day's work. And yet to my own son, I was just an obstacle, a senile old fool to be managed and manipulated. I peered through the small gap between the curtain and the wall. I saw Adam check his watch, a look of annoyance on his face. He did not look like a man mourning his mother. He looked like a man waiting for a business meeting to end. Beth was checking her makeup in a small compact mirror, her earlier tears completely gone. "It is just that we are so close," Beth whispered, snapping the mirror shut. "Once we get power of attorney, we can list the house immediately. The market is hot right now. We can get $500,000 for it easy, and with the insurance money, we are finally free." Sell the house. Emily's garden was just starting to bloom. We had planted those roses together. We had talked about sitting on that porch until we were 90. They wanted to sell it, before her body was even in the ground. A wave of nausea rolled over me. This was not just greed. This was cruelty. This was a plan. They had discussed this. They had mapped it out. While Emily was dying in the hospital, while I was holding her hand and praying for a miracle, they were calculating the value of our estate. I realized then that I did not know these people. The Adam I raised was gone. Or maybe he never existed. Maybe I had been the clueless old man all along, blinded by love, refusing to see the selfishness that had been growing in him like a cancer. I wanted to burst through the curtain. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to grab Adam by his expensive lapels and ask him how he could betray his mother's memory like this. But something stopped me. A survival instinct I did not know I had. If they thought I was a clueless old man, maybe I should let them keep thinking that. I took a deep breath, forcing my shaking hands to steady. I poured a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. Then I deliberately shuffled my feet, making noise as I walked back out from behind the curtain, hunching my shoulders, making myself look smaller, older, more broken. Adam turned immediately, his face shifting instantly into a mask of concern. "Dad," he said, rushing over to take my arm. "Are you okay? You were gone for a while." Beth and I were getting worried. I looked into his eyes. They were the same shape as Emily's, but there was no warmth in them. Just a cold, calculating assessment. "I am fine, son," I said, my voice raspy. Just feeling a little dizzy. It is all too much." Beth appeared at my other side, her hand resting gently on my back. Her touch made my skin crawl. "Of course it is, Dad. Why don't we get you home soon? You need to rest. We can handle everything else here. We need you strong for tomorrow." For tomorrow. The day they planned to trick me into signing my life away. I looked at Emily's casket one last time. "I promise you, Em," I thought, "they will not take what we built. I do not know how and I do not know when, but I will stop them." We left the funeral home an hour later. The drive back to our empty house was silent, but as I stared out the window at the gray passing streets, my mind was racing. I was heartbroken, yes, but the numbness was gone. In its place was a cold, hard rage. I thought the worst part of my day was over. I thought the betrayal at the funeral home was the climax of my nightmare. I was wrong. The nightmare was just beginning. We pulled into the driveway. The house looked dark and lonely. Adam helped me up the steps, treating me like I was made of glass. "Go upstairs and lie down, Dad," he said. "We will order some food." I nodded and walked slowly up the stairs, gripping the banister. I went into our bedroom, my bedroom now, and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence of the house pressed in on me. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a number I did not have saved. I almost didn't answer. I didn't want to talk to anyone. But something, maybe that same instinct that made me stay quiet behind the curtain, told me to pick up. "Hello," I whispered. "Mr. Harrison." The voice on the other end was sharp, authoritative, but laced with panic. "This is Griffin Thorne, Emily's boss." I frowned. Griffin Thorne was a powerful man, a CEO. Emily had worked for him for 20 years, but he had never called my personal cell phone. "Mr. Thorne," I said, "look, today was the funeral. I really cannot." "Listen to me closely, Tom," he interrupted, his voice urgent. "I am deeply sorry for your loss, but you need to come to my office, right now, tonight." "I cannot," I said, confused. "My son is downstairs." "I am—" "No," Thorne shouted, almost losing his composure. "Do not tell your son. Do not tell your daughter-in-law. Do not let them know you are speaking to me." Why, I asked, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. What is going on? There was a pause on the other line. A silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. "Because I found something in Emily's files, Tom. Something she hid for you. And if Adam and Beth find out I have it, you could be in terrible danger." I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, looking at the closed bedroom door. Downstairs, I could hear the murmur of Adam and Beth's voices. Plotting, planning. "I will be there," I said. I hung up the phone. I stood up. The grief was still there, a dull ache in my soul. But now there was fear, and underneath the fear, the awakening of a fighter. I was 70 years old. I was a carpenter, and I had one last job to do. I had to fix the mess my family had become, even if I had to tear the whole house down to do it. The silence in the house after a funeral is heavier than any physical weight I have ever carried. It presses against your eardrums and settles deep into your bones. After I hung up the phone with Griffin Thorne, I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, just breathing. The room was dark, illuminated only by the streetlights filtering through the blinds. This was the room I had shared with Emily for 4 decades. Her perfume still lingered on the pillowcase, a faint scent of lavender and vanilla that made my chest ache with a fresh wave of grief. But I did not have the luxury of collapsing into that grief. Not now. Griffin's words were ringing in my ears like a fire alarm. "You are in danger." I stood up, my knees cracking slightly. I needed to get out of the house. I needed to get to Griffin's office without alerting the 2 people downstairs who were supposedly my family. I splashed some cold water on my face in the master bathroom, staring at my reflection. The man looking back at me was gray and tired, with deep lines etched around his eyes. But there was a spark of something else there, too. A spark of anger. I grabbed my car keys from the dresser and my wallet. I tried to tread lightly as I opened the bedroom door. The hinges, which I had oiled just last month, made no sound. I walked to the top of the landing. The hallway was shadowed, but light spilled from the kitchen downstairs. I could hear the clinking of glass and the low hum of conversation. I took a step down, my hand gripping the wooden banister. I had sanded and stained this banister myself 20 years ago. I knew every curve of this house. I knew which floorboard creaked on the 3rd step. I stepped over it carefully. My plan was simple. I would tell them I needed some fresh air. I would say I needed to drive to the 24-hour pharmacy for some aspirin. It was a flimsy excuse, but it was all I had. I made it halfway down the stairs when the voices in the kitchen stopped abruptly. It was as if they had sensed a change in the air pressure. A moment later, Adam appeared at the bottom of the staircase. He was holding a glass of scotch. He looked up at me, and for a second, I saw a flash of annoyance cross his face before he smoothed it over with that practiced look of concern. "Dad," he said, his voice smooth. "Where are you going?" "It is almost midnight." I gripped the keys tighter in my pocket. "I just need some air, Adam. I have a headache. I thought I would take a short drive, just to clear my mind." Adam did not move. He stood there, blocking the path to the front door. He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving mine. "I do not think that is a good idea, Dad. You have had a long day. You are emotional. You should not be behind the wheel." I felt a prickle of irritation. "I am not invalid, Adam. I have been driving since before you were born. I am just going to the pharmacy." Beth stepped out from the kitchen then. She was still wearing her black funeral dress, but she had taken off her shoes. She held a thick manila folder in her hands. The sight of it made my stomach turn. These were the papers they had whispered about at the funeral home. "Oh, Dad, please do not go out," Beth said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that felt like syrup masking the taste of poison. "We were actually just waiting for you to come down. We have some things we need to discuss. Important things." I stood frozen on the stairs. I was trapped. If I pushed past them, it would escalate the situation. I needed to play the role they had cast for me. The tired, confused old man. "Can it not wait until morning?" I asked, letting my shoulders slump. "I am very tired, Beth." Adam set his glass down on the entry table and walked up 2 steps, closing the distance between us. He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm, almost controlling. "It really is best if we handle this now, Dad. It is what Mom would have wanted." There it was, the weaponization of Emily. They knew I could not say no to her memory. I let out a long, defeated sigh and allowed Adam to guide me down the rest of the stairs and into the living room. They sat me down in my favorite armchair, the leather one that faced the fireplace. The fire was out, leaving only cold, gray ash in the grate. Beth sat on the sofa opposite me, placing the folder on the coffee table with a heavy thud. Adam stood behind her, acting like a sentinel. The atmosphere in the room did not feel like a family gathering. It felt like an interrogation. It felt like a business transaction where I was the commodity being traded. So Beth started opening the folder. "We know you are grieving, Dad. We all are. But the world keeps turning and there are realities we have to face. Mom left things in a bit of a mess." I frowned. That was a lie. Emily was the most organized person I knew. She was an accountant. She balanced our checkbook to the penny every single week. "A mess?" I asked. "What kind of mess?" "Financial complications," Adam interrupted smoothly. "Taxes, unpaid bills, insurance intricacies. You know how complex these things can get. And we know you do not want to deal with that stress right now. You deserve to rest. You deserve to mourn without worrying about red tape." He walked around the sofa and picked up a document from the folder. It was thick, stapled at the top, filled with dense legal jargon. "That is why we had our lawyer draw this up," Adam continued, handing me a pen. "It is a standard power of attorney. It just gives me and Beth the legal authority to handle the accounts, pay the bills, and manage the estate for you. It is just temporary, of course. Just until you are back on your feet." I looked at the document. The words swam before my eyes, but the header was clear. Durable power of attorney. And underneath that, another document peeked out. Transfer of deed. They were not just trying to pay the bills. They were trying to take everything. Beth leaned forward, her eyes wide and pleading. "Mom made us promise Dad. In the hospital right before the end. She grabbed my hand and said, 'Beth, please take care of Tom. Do not let him worry about money. Make sure he is safe.' This is us fulfilling that promise." I felt a surge of bile in my throat. I knew with absolute certainty that Emily had never said that. Emily had warned Griffin Thorne. She had suspected them. She would never have handed me over to them on a silver platter. I looked from Adam to Beth. I saw the hunger in their eyes. They were looking at me, but they were not seeing a father or a father-in-law. They were seeing a signature. They were seeing a bank account. They were seeing a house they could turn into cash. The danger Griffin spoke of was not some abstract threat. It was sitting right here in my living room. I held the pen, my hand trembling. Not from age, but from rage. I needed to get out of here. I needed to get to Griffin, but if I refused to sign now, they would know I was suspicious. They might not let me leave the house at all. I looked at the paper. I looked at Adam. I cannot read this without my reading glasses, I lied. My voice sounded frail even to my own ears. I left them on the nightstand upstairs. I will get them for you, Beth said, starting to rise. No, I said quickly. I also need to take my blood pressure medication. I forgot it. I need a moment. Just give me a few minutes upstairs. Adam hesitated. He looked at the clock. He looked at the papers. Then he looked at me, a pathetic old man in a cardigan looking lost and confused. He let his guard down. Okay, Dad, Adam said, stepping back. Go take your medicine. Get your glasses. We will be right here waiting. I nodded slowly and stood up. I walked toward the stairs, feeling their eyes on my back like laser beams. Every step was an effort. I had to maintain the charade. I had to look like I was defeated. But as I reached the landing and turned the corner out of their sight, my posture straightened. I did not go to the bedroom. I went to the guest room at the back of the house, the one that had a window overlooking the trellis in the garden. I used to climb down that trellis when I was a teenager to sneak out to see Emily. I prayed my 70-year-old joints could still handle the descent. I did not have much time. Adam and Beth were downstairs waiting for a signature that would sign my life away. And across town, Griffin Thorne was waiting with a truth that I terrified to hear. I locked the guest room door, quietly opened the window, and felt the cold night air hit my face. It was time to run. I closed the window in the guest room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The instinct to run was overwhelming, but a colder, sharper logic took over. If I climbed down that trellis now and disappeared into the night, Adam would call the police. He would tell them his grieving, confused father had wandered off. They would find me, bring me back, and I would be locked in this house with no way out. Number 1. I had to face them one last time. I had to buy myself a few hours of darkness. I grabbed my reading glasses from the nightstand, smoothed down my cardigan, and forced my shaking hands to still. I was an actor stepping onto a stage, and the role was the helpless old man they wanted me to be. When I walked back into the living room, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. Adam was pacing by the fireplace, and Beth was tapping her manicured nails on the leather arm of the sofa. They both looked up sharply as I entered. "Took you long enough, Dad?" Adam said, trying to keep his voice light, but the edge of impatience was sharp. "Come sit down. We need to get this done so we can all get some sleep." I sat back down in my chair, clutching my glasses. I looked at the papers again, forcing myself to focus on the text under the transfer of deed section. The property address was there. My address. My home. "Why do we need to transfer the deed, Adam?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "This house is paid for. There is no mortgage." Adam sighed, the sound of a parent explaining something simple to a toddler. "Dad, this house is too big for you now. It is 4 bedrooms. The yard is an acre. The maintenance alone is going to be a nightmare. The roof needs work, the plumbing is old. You cannot handle that alone." "I can hire help," I murmured. "I know this house, Adam. I built half of it." Beth leaned forward, placing her hand over mine. Her skin was cold. "It is not just the maintenance, Tom. It is the memories. Mom is everywhere in this house. Living here alone, it is going to destroy you. You will be surrounded by ghosts." I looked at the fireplace. I remembered the Christmas Eves we spent there. I remembered Emily reading by that fire while I whittled toys for Adam. Those were not ghosts. Those were the things keeping me alive. "So what is the plan?" I asked, looking up at my son. "If I sell the house, where do I go?" Adam smiled, a practiced salesman smile. "That is the best part. We found a place. It is called Golden Horizons. It is a luxury senior living community. It is top of the line, Dad. They have chef's activities, medical staff on call 24/7. You would have your own apartment, but you would never be lonely. It is what Mom wanted. She told us she did not want you to be a burden on anyone. She wanted you to be somewhere safe. The lie was so bold, so disgusting, that I almost retched. Emily hated nursing homes. Her own mother had died in one, neglected and alone, and Emily had made me swear on our wedding anniversary 10 years ago that I would never put her in one and that I would never go to one. "We die in our own bed, Thomas," she had said. "That is the deal." Now my son was standing there using her name to sell me into captivity. He did not want me safe. He wanted me out of the way. He wanted to liquidate the house, take the money, and dump me in a facility where I would rot away medicated and forgotten. I felt a fire ignite in my belly, hot and fierce. It took every ounce of my self-control not to tear the papers in half and throw them in his face. But I remembered Griffin's warning. "You are in danger." I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes, feigning exhaustion. "Golden Horizons," I repeated slowly. "It sounds expensive." "Mom left enough to cover it," Beth said quickly, "and the sale of the house will take care of the rest. You do not have to worry about a thing. Just sign, Dad. Let us take care of you." I looked at the pen Adam was holding out to me. If I signed that I was dead, I would lose my home, my freedom, and my dignity. "I cannot," I whispered. The silence in the room was absolute. "What do you mean you cannot?" Adam's voice dropped an octave. It was dangerous now. "I mean, I cannot focus," I said, making my hand shake violently as I reached for the water glass on the table. "My head is spinning, Adam. I feel sick. The grief. It is like a fog. I cannot read these legal terms tonight. I do not understand what I am signing." Adam slammed his hand down on the table. "It is simple, Dad. It is just a signature." "Adam," Beth hissed, touching his arm. I shrank back into the chair, playing the victim. "Why are you shouting at me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I just buried my wife today. Can you not give me one night, just one night, to say goodbye to her in my prayers? I will sign it in the morning. I promise. Just, please let me sleep." Adam looked at me, his jaw clenching and unclenching. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing the risk. If he pushed too hard, I might crack completely or call a lawyer. If he waited, he risked losing momentum. But he looked at my trembling hands, my slumped shoulders, and he decided I was too weak to be a threat. "Fine," Adam spat out. "Fine. Go to bed. But we are doing this first thing in the morning, before breakfast. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said meekly. "Thank you, son." I rose from the chair, leaving the papers on the table. I walked to the stairs, feeling their eyes boring into my back. I did not look back. I climbed the stairs, went into my room, and closed the door. I locked it. Then I turned off the light and sat in the darkness, fully clothed. I did not sleep. I listened. I heard them arguing downstairs in hushed tones. I heard the clink of another bottle being opened. Eventually, I heard them come upstairs. I heard the door to the guest room close. I heard the house settle into silence. I waited. I watched the red numbers on the digital clock change. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. At 2:45, I stood up. My legs were stiff, but my mind was crystal clear. I did not take a suitcase. I did not take any clothes. I took my wallet, my phone, and a small framed photo of Emily from the dresser. That was all I needed. I opened my bedroom door. The hallway was pitch black. I moved like a ghost. I knew that the third step from the top creaked, so I skipped it. I knew that the floorboard outside the guest room groaned if you stepped in the center, so I hugged the wall. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The moonlight was streaming through the living room window, illuminating the papers still sitting on the coffee table. The contract for my imprisonment. I resisted the urge to burn them. Not yet. I went to the kitchen. The back door was old and the deadbolt sometimes stuck. I gripped the lock, turning it with agonizing slowness. Click. The sound seemed loud as a gunshot in the silence. I froze, holding my breath, listening for any movement upstairs. Silence. I turned the handle and stepped out into the night. The cold air hit me like a physical blow, shocking my system awake. It was 3 a.m, and the world was asleep, but I was more awake than I had been in years. I closed the door softly behind me and walked. I did not run. Running attracts attention. I walked with purpose, cutting through the backyard, past the rose bushes that looked like dark, thorny sentinels in the moonlight. I walked 2 miles to the main road, where I knew there was a 24-hour gas station. My hip ached and my breath came in white puffs of steam, but I did not stop. When I reached the gas station, the attendant looked at me suspiciously. An old man in a cardigan walking alone at 3 a.m. "I need a taxi," I told him, my voice steady. 20 minutes later, I was in the back of a yellow cab, watching my neighborhood disappear in the rearview mirror. The driver asked me where I was going. "Downtown," I said. "The Thorn Building." As the city lights began to blur past the window, the fear I had been holding back finally washed over me. I was 70 years old. I was homeless. I was running from my own son. And I was heading toward a truth that I knew would break whatever was left of my heart. But as I clutched Emily's photo in my pocket, I knew one thing for sure. The clueless old man was gone. The fighter had taken his place, and he was going to war. The taxi ride to the city center felt like a journey between 2 different worlds. I left behind the quiet, tree-lined streets of my neighborhood, where betrayal was hidden behind closed doors and manicured lawns, and entered the cold steel canyons of the financial district. The Thorn Building rose up like a shard of black glass against the night sky, imposing and impenetrable. I paid the driver with trembling hands and stepped onto the pavement. The wind whipped around the corner, biting through my thin cardigan, but I barely felt it. My body was numb, operating on adrenaline and a terrifying sense of purpose. The security guard in the lobby was expecting me. He did not ask for identification. He simply nodded and used a key card to swipe me into the private elevator. The ascent was smooth and silent, my ears popping as the numbers on the digital display climbed higher and higher. When the doors slid open on the penthouse floor, Griffin Thorn was waiting. I had met him a few times over the years at company holiday parties. He had always been a figure of immense power and confidence, a man who commanded rooms with a single glance. But tonight, standing in the dim light of his office foyer, he looked different. His tie was loosened, his sleeves were rolled up, and his face was gray with exhaustion. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. "Thomas," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you for coming. I know what this must be costing you." He extended a hand, and I took it. His grip was firm, grounding. He led me into his office, a vast space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the sleeping city. But my eyes were drawn to the third person in the room. Sitting in a leather chair in the corner was a man I did not know. He was younger than us, perhaps 50, with a sharp, weathered face and eyes that looked like they had seen the darkest corners of humanity. He wore a worn leather jacket that seemed out of place in this pristine corporate sanctuary. Tom Griffin said, gesturing to the stranger. "This is Rick Sanchez. He is a private investigator. I hired him 3 months ago." I stared at the stranger. "You hired a private investigator?" Why, Rick stood up. He did not smile. He simply nodded at me with a solemn respect. "Because your wife asked him to, Mr. Harrison." The words hit me like a physical blow. Emily hired you." Griffin walked to his desk and poured 3 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass. He handed it to me. "Drink this, Tom. You are going to need it." I took the glass, but I did not drink. I just held it, needing something to anchor my shaking hands. "Start talking, Griffin. Please. Just tell me what is going on." Griffin leaned against his mahogany desk, crossing his arms over his chest. He took a deep breath as if steeling himself. About 6 months ago, Emily came to me. She was terrified. She had found discrepancies in the company accounts. Small amounts at first, then larger. Someone was siphoning money from the operational funds. I frowned, confused. What does this have to do with me with Adam? Griffin looked me dead in the eye. Because the person stealing the money was Adam. The glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound was explosive in the quiet room, but no one moved. The amber liquid seeped into the expensive carpet like a spreading stain. No, I whispered. That is impossible. Adam has his own business. He is successful. I built the workshop for him. Rick stepped forward, pulling a file from his jacket. He opened it and laid out a series of photographs and bank statements on the desk. It was all a lie, Mr. Harrison. The business you built. Adam ran it into the ground 5 years ago. He has been living on credit and loans. And when those ran dry, he started gambling. High stakes, underground games. By the time Emily found out, he was in debt to some very dangerous people for over $2 million. I looked at the documents. The numbers swam before my eyes, but the red ink was undeniable. My son was not just a failure. He was a thief. He had been stealing from the man who gave his mother a career. Emily confronted him. Griffin continued softly. She told him she would not cover for him. She told him he had to confess or she would turn him in. She froze his access to the accounts. She cut him off. I sank into the nearest chair, my legs no longer able to support me. My son, my little boy. He had looked me in the eye at the funeral and played the grieving son while all along he was a criminal who had broken his mother's heart. But that is not why you called me here at 4 a.m. Is it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Embezzlement is a crime, but it is not. It is not this. You said I was in danger. Griffin and Rick exchanged a look of heavy shared knowledge. Rick picked up a small sealed plastic bag from the desk. Inside was a piece of paper handwritten. I recognized the penmanship immediately. The elegant loops of the Y and the sharp crossing of the T. It was Emily's handwriting. 3 weeks ago, Emily came to my office again, Rick said, his voice low and steady. She was sick. She had lost weight. Her hair was thinning. She told everyone it was just old age or stress. But she knew Tom. She knew something was wrong. She gave me this note and told me to open it only if she died suddenly. He handed me the bag. I took it, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. I read the words through the plastic. If I die, do not believe it was natural. Check Adam and Beth. They are desperate. And please, for the love of God, check the coffee. Check Tom's coffee. The room spun. Check Tom's coffee. I looked up at them, my vision blurring. Coffee. Rick nodded grimly. Emily suspected she was being poisoned, Tom. And she suspected they were doing the same to you. She told us that every morning Adam or Beth would insist on making the coffee. They would call it a special blend. They would add vitamins or supplements for your health. My hand flew to my mouth. I remembered the bitter taste. I remembered the way Beth would hover over me until I finished every drop. I remembered the dizzy spells, the brain fog, the aching joints that I had attributed to grief and aging. They have been poisoning me, I choked out. Griffin knelt down beside my chair, placing a hand on my knee. We believed the plan was to remove Emily first, because she controlled the money. Then they needed to get rid of you to inherit the estate. But they needed it to look like natural causes. A decline in health. An old man fading away after his wife died. It is the perfect crime. I closed my eyes and a tear finally escaped, tracking a hot path down my cheek. It wasn't grief anymore. It was pure, unadulterated horror. My wife didn't just die. She was murdered. And in her final days, while she was weak and dying, she wasn't thinking of saving herself. She was thinking of me. She was gathering evidence. She was leaving a trail of breadcrumbs so that I would not suffer the same fate. She saved my life, I whispered. Even from the grave, she saved me. Rick cleared his throat. We have more, Mr. Harrison. We did not just sit on this note. When Emily gave us the go-ahead, we started testing. We need to show you the toxicology reports. But you need to brace yourself. Because what is in your blood is not just a vitamin deficiency. It is a death sentence if we do not stop them. I opened my eyes. The image of Adam and Beth in my kitchen smiling as they handed me a mug flashed through my mind. They were not family. They were executioners. Show me, I said, my voice hardening into something cold and sharp. Show me everything. I was no longer the victim. I was the witness, and I was about to become their judge. The sun was beginning to rise outside the window, casting a blood-red light over the city. It was a fitting color for the day ahead. Because today, the war truly began. Rick slid the first document across the mahogany surface of the desk. The paper made a dry, rasping sound that seemed deafening in the quiet office. I looked down at it. It was a forensic toxicology report from a private lab. The name at the top was Emily Harrison. I forced my eyes to focus on the results section, though my vision was swimming with tears and exhaustion. I saw words I recognized from news stories and crime dramas, but seeing them next to my wife's name felt like a violation of the laws of nature. Arsenic, warfarin. Rick pointed to the numbers with a pen, his hand steady. The concentrations were high, Mr. Harrison. Not high enough to cause immediate cardiac arrest, which would trigger an autopsy, but high enough to cause organ failure over a period of months. The warfarin is a blood thinner. Combined with the arsenic, it mimics the symptoms of natural decline: fatigue, bruising, confusion, heart failure. It was designed to look like old age was simply taking its course. I felt a scream building in my throat, but it wouldn't come out. I thought about Emily in those final months. I thought about how weak she had been, how she struggled to lift a cup of tea. I had sat by her bed, holding her hand, telling her it was okay to let go, that she had fought hard enough. I had told her it was God's will, but it wasn't God. It was my son. Rick pulled out the second sheet of paper. This one had my name on it. Thomas Harrison. The date was from 2 weeks ago. Emily brought us a sample of the coffee you were drinking every morning, Rick said softly. She poured it into a sterile vial when you weren't looking. She told us Beth called it her special energy blend. I looked at the report. The same chemicals were listed. The levels were lower than Emily's, but they were there. Present. Positive. For the last 6 months, I have had terrible headaches. I have had days where I could barely get out of bed because my joints felt like they were filled with broken glass. I had moments of memory loss where I would stand in the middle of my workshop and forget what I was building. I told my doctor it was stress. I told myself I was just getting old. I accepted that my body was failing me, but my body wasn't failing. I was being murdered. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow to the gut. I doubled over in the chair, gasping for air. The room spun. All the memories of the last year rewrote themselves in my mind. Adam's concern when I said I felt sick wasn't love. It was him checking to see if the dosage was working. Beth's insistence on making my breakfast wasn't kindness. It was administration. 45 years. I spent 45 years building a life. I built a business. I built a home. I built a family. I remember holding Adam when he was hours old, his tiny hand gripping my finger. I remember promising him that I would always protect him. I remember teaching him to drive, terrified he would get hurt. I had spent my entire existence trying to shield him from the harshness of the world. And in return, he had decided that my life was less valuable than his debt. He had decided that my death was a necessary line item in his financial recovery plan. The pain of the poison in my blood was nothing compared to the agony of that truth. It severed something in my soul. The father in me died in that chair. The man who loved his son unconditionally was suffocated by the cold, hard facts on those sheets of paper. Griffin stood up and walked around the desk. He placed a hand on my shoulder, but I barely felt it. "There is one more thing, Tom, and this is going to be the hardest part. But you need to see it. You need to know exactly what you are up against." He opened a laptop computer on the desk and turned the screen toward me. Rick tapped a few keys. The screen flickered to life. It was a black and white video feed, grainy but clear. I recognized the setting immediately. It was my kitchen. The camera seemed to be hidden somewhere high up, maybe in the ventilation grate or above the cabinets. The timestamp in the corner read 7:00 a.m. 3 weeks ago. In the video, the kitchen was empty for a moment. Then Beth walked in. She was wearing her silk morning robe, her hair tied back. She looked normal. She looked like a woman starting her day. She walked over to the coffee maker. She opened the cabinet above the stove, the one where we kept the spices and vitamins. She reached into the back behind the flour jar and pulled out a small, unmarked glass vial. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath catching in my throat. She looked over her shoulder toward the doorway, checking to see if anyone was coming. The look on her face wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was annoyance. She looked like she was doing a chore she disliked, like taking out the trash or scrubbing a toilet. She opened the vial and tapped a small amount of white powder into the coffee filter. Then she added the coffee grounds on top of it, covering the poison. She gave the machine a little shake to settle the grounds. Then the most chilling part happened. Adam walked into the kitchen. I watched my son on the screen. He walked up behind his wife, wrapped his arms around her waist, and kissed her on the neck. He looked at the coffee machine. He looked at the vial she was still holding. He didn't scream. He didn't stop her. He didn't call the police. He smiled. He whispered something in her ear, and they both laughed. It was a silent laugh on the video, but in my head, it sounded like the shrieking of demons. They laughed while they prepared the drink that would kill his father. Rick paused the video. The image froze on their smiling faces. My son and his wife standing in the heart of the home I built, comfortable and happy in their cruelty. I stared at the frozen image. I looked at Adam's face. I searched for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of remorse. There was none. He looked relaxed. He looked relieved. I sat back in the chair, the energy draining out of me. My hands were shaking so bad, I had to clasp them together in my lap to stop them. "They are not people," I whispered. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from a deep well. "No," Griffin said softly. "They are not. They are predators." I looked down at my hands again. The hands that had held Adam when he scraped his knee. The hands that had built his first pine wood derby car. I felt a sudden urge to wash them. I felt dirty. I felt contaminated by my own bloodline. "So it is true," I said. "Everything Emily said. Everything I feared." "It is true," Rick confirmed. "And right now the police have this evidence. But because the toxicology report is from a private lab, and the video doesn't explicitly show what the powder is, a defense attorney could argue it was just sugar or actual vitamins. They could argue the lab results were contaminated. If we arrest them now, they might make bail. They might destroy evidence. We need to catch them in the act. We need to catch them doing it to you today, with a police chain of custody on the evidence." I looked at the screen again. I looked at the monsters in my kitchen. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. The grief for the son I thought I had was being replaced by a hatred for the man who actually existed. Emily had fought them alone. She had died trying to stop them. I would not let her death be in vain. I would not let them win. I stood up. My legs felt steady now. The weakness was gone. "What do I have to do?" I asked. Rick looked at me with respect. You have to go back there, Tom. You have to go back into that house. You have to look them in the eye and pretend you are still the clueless old man. You have to let them make you one last cup of coffee. I nodded. I could do that. I was a carpenter. I knew how to build a frame. I knew how to set a trap. I will go back, I said. I will let them think they have won. And then when they least expect it, I will bring their whole world crashing down. Griffin handed me a small earpiece and a button-sized camera. Put these on, he said. We will be listening. We will be watching. You will not be alone. I took the devices. I wasn't alone. I had Griffin. I had Rick. And I had Emily. Her spirit was the steel in my spine. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The sun had fully risen now. The darkness was gone. It was time to go home. It was time to face my executioners. And it was time to show them that the old man they planned to bury was still very much alive. The plan sounded simple in theory, but as Rick laid it out on the glass table in the morning light, I felt the blood drain from my face. We had the toxicology report, and we had the grainy video from weeks ago, but Rick explained that in a court of law against high-priced defense attorneys, it might not be enough to secure a life sentence. They could claim the video showed them adding sugar or a supplement. They could claim the toxicology results were from environmental exposure, or that Emily had taken the wrong medication by mistake. To put them away for good, to ensure they never hurt anyone else again, we needed absolute, undeniable proof. We needed to catch them in the act of attempting to murder me with a chain of custody that no lawyer could break. I sat there listening to the hum of the city waking up below us, realizing what he was asking me to do. I had to go back into that house. I had to walk into the kitchen where my wife was poisoned. I had to look into the eyes of the son I raised, the boy I taught to fish and ride a bike, and I had to smile at him while he prepared to kill me. I had to be the bait in a trap designed to catch my own flesh and blood. The realization made me feel physically ill, a cold knot of nausea tightening in my stomach. It went against every instinct of a father. A father protects. A father forgives. A father does not set a trap for his child. But then I remembered the cold, hard numbers on that toxicology report. I remembered the laughter I saw on the video. Adam had stopped being my son the moment he decided my life was worth less than his gambling debts. Rick leaned forward, his voice low and intense. You have to play the part of the clueless old man one last time, Tom. You have to be the confused, grieving widower who is ready to give up. You go back there and tell them you are ready to sign. Tell them you have accepted your fate. But you need to create a window of time. You need to delay the signing just enough for us to get our team in place. I nodded slowly, my mind racing. I knew exactly how to do it. I knew their weaknesses. I knew that despite their cruelty, they still felt the need to keep up appearances. They needed to feel like the heroes of the story, the benevolent children taking care of the senile father. I would use their own arrogance against them. I will tell them I want a final family dinner, I said, my voice gaining strength. I will tell them that before I sign the house over and move into the facility, I want one last meal to honor Emily. I will ask for her favorite roast chicken. And I will ask Adam to make me coffee. I will tell him that nobody makes it quite like he does. Griffin looked at me with a mixture of sorrow and admiration. That is perfect, Tom. It appeals to their ego. It gives them a sense of finality. They will think they have won. They will think this is the victory lap. Rick began to outline the technical details. While I distracted them by taking them out to buy the ingredients for this special dinner, his team would enter the house. They would install high-definition micro-cameras in the kitchen cabinets, behind the clock, and in the light fixtures. They would replace the old smoke detectors with listening devices. Every corner of that kitchen would be covered. Every word they whispered, every gram of powder they poured, would be recorded in 4K resolution. But the most dangerous part of the plan was the coffee itself. I had to ask for it. I had to watch Adam make it, and I had to take it from his hand. I had to bring the cup to my lips. I had to make them believe I was going to drink it. If I hesitated, if I showed even a flicker of suspicion, they might abort. They might realize I knew. And if they realized I knew, the violence could turn from poison to something much more immediate and brutal. I stood up and walked to the window, looking at my reflection in the glass. I looked tired. My skin was gray, my eyes were rimmed with red. I didn't need makeup to look like a dying man. The poison in my system and the grief in my heart were doing the work for me. I adjusted my collar, straightening the cardigan that suddenly felt like a costume. I was an actor now. This was the most important performance of my life. I am ready, I said, turning back to them, but I need to know one thing. If they do it, if they put the poison in the cup, will you arrest them immediately? Rick shook his head. Not immediately. We need you to take possession of the cup. We need the video of him handing it to you and you holding it. That completes the chain. Attempted murder. Once you have the cup, you give us the signal. You drop a spoon. You say a specific phrase. Then we breach. The drive back to the suburbs was a blur. I sat in the back of Griffin's car watching the familiar landmarks pass by. The park where I took Adam for Little League. The ice cream shop where we went after every report card. Every street corner held a memory, and every memory felt like a knife twisting in my gut. How did we get here? How did the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee become a man capable of matricide and patricide? I tried to find an answer, a moment where I failed him, but deep down I knew the truth. Greed is a disease that doesn't need a reason to infect a soul. When the car pulled up a block away from my house, I asked the driver to stop. I needed to walk the rest of the way. I needed to enter the scene on my own 2 feet. I checked the small earpiece Rick had given me. It was invisible, tucked deep inside my ear canal. We are with you, Tom. Rick's voice echoed in my head. Just breathe. I walked up the driveway. The house loomed over me, silent and imposing. The curtains were drawn. My car was still in the driveway where I had left it. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. My hand trembled not from age but from the sheer terror of what lay behind that wood. I pushed the door open. Adam and Beth were in the living room. They jumped up when I entered. They looked exhausted, their eyes wide with a mix of relief and suspicion. They had probably been up all night wondering where I had gone, wondering if their plan had fallen apart. Dad! Adam exclaimed, rushing over. Where the hell have you been? We were about to call the police. I looked at him. I looked at the face that I had loved for 45 years, and I saw nothing but a stranger. A dangerous, desperate stranger. I summoned every ounce of strength I had left. I let my shoulders slump. I let my mouth hang slightly open. I let the confusion cloud my eyes. I just walked. I mumbled, my voice cracking perfectly. I walked and I walked. I needed to thank Adam. I needed to say goodbye to the neighborhood. Beth was at my side instantly, her hands patting down my arms, checking for what? A wire, a weapon, or just checking to see if the old man was still solid. You had us so worried, Tom, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. You shouldn't be wandering around at night. Your condition, I know, I interrupted softly. I know. You were right. Both of you were right. I am not capable anymore. I get confused. I forget things. I am tired of fighting. I saw the look they exchanged. It was a look of pure triumph. They thought I had broken. They thought the bird had flown back into the cage of its own free will. So you will sign, Adam asked, trying to hide the eagerness in his voice. I nodded slowly, shuffling toward the kitchen. Yes, I will sign. I will go to Golden Horizons. I will sell the house, but I paused, leaning heavily on the kitchen island. But what Dad? Adam asked, stepping closer. I want one last day, I said, looking at the empty coffee maker. I want us to have a dinner tonight. A proper send-off. I want roast chicken like your mother used to make. And I want us to sit together as a family one last time. Tomorrow I will sign everything. Tomorrow I will go, but tonight, I just want to be a father with his children. Adam let out a breath he must have been holding for hours. Is that it? Just dinner, that is it, I said. And Adam? Yeah. Dad, I feel very weak this morning. My head is pounding. Could you make me some coffee? You know how to make it strong, just the way I like it. Adam smiled. It was the same smile from the video, the smile of the executioner. Of course, Dad, he said, walking toward the cabinet where the poison was hidden. I will make you the best cup you have ever had. I sat down at the table, my heart pounding a rhythm of war against my ribs. The trap was set. The players were on the stage, and I was ready to bring the curtain down. The atmosphere in the kitchen shifted the moment I agreed to sign the papers. It was as if a heavy, suffocating curtain had been lifted, replaced by a frantic, nervous energy. Adam and Beth exchanged glances that were less about relief and more about victory. They thought they had finally broken the old horse. They thought I was ready to be led to the glue factory without a fight. I sat at the kitchen table, hunching my shoulders to make myself look smaller, more defeated. I let my hands rest on the table intentionally, keeping them still, suppressing the urge to clench them into fists. I looked at Adam, who was leaning against the counter, already mentally spending the inheritance he thought he was hours away from securing. I looked at Beth, who was rummaging through the refrigerator, pretending to check for ingredients, but really hiding the smirk that was tugging at the corners of her mouth. I am sorry about last night, I said, keeping my voice low and raspy. The grief, it just comes in waves. I get confused. I forget where I am sometimes. I did not mean to snap at you. You are only trying to help. Adam pushed off the counter and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. It took every ounce of my willpower not to recoil from his touch. His hand felt heavy and hot, like a brand. It is okay, Dad, he said, his voice smooth and patronizing. We understand. It is a lot of change all at once. We just want what is best for you. I nodded slowly, staring at the grain of the wood on the table. I know, I said. I know you do. That is why I have decided. I will sign the papers tonight, right after dinner. I just want one last evening, one last memory of us as a family in this house before I let it go. Beth turned around, beaming. That sounds wonderful, Tom. A family dinner, just like old times. But for it to be like old times, I continued, raising my head to look at my son. We need the right wine. Your mother always insisted on that specific Pinot Noir from the vintage shop downtown whenever she made roast chicken. The one with the gold label. We do not have any in the cellar. Adam checked his watch. He frowned. Dad, we have plenty of wine here. I can just open a Cabernet. No, I said, allowing a stubborn, senile edge to creep into my voice. It has to be the Pinot Noir. For Emily. It is my only condition, Adam. If we are going to do this, we do it right. I want to go get it. I want to pick it out myself. I saw the flicker of annoyance in Adam's eyes, but he quickly tamped it down. He could not risk upsetting me now, not when he was so close to the finish line. He looked at Beth. She gave him a subtle nod, a silent command to humor the old man. Fine, Adam said, forcing a smile. I will drive you. We can go right now. I stood up, moving slowly, grabbing my cane even though I did not really need it. It was a prop part of the costume. As we walked toward the garage, I touched my ear, a signal to the tiny device hidden there. I knew that somewhere nearby in a nondescript van, parked down the street, Rick Sanchez and his team were watching. Getting Adam out of the house was the key. With Adam gone and Beth likely to be occupied in the garden or the shower getting ready for her performance tonight, Rick's team would have the window they needed to enter through the back and plant the cameras. I climbed into the passenger seat of Adam's luxury sedan. It was a beautiful car, leather seats, dashboard that looked like a cockpit. But as I looked around, I noticed the signs of neglect. There were fast food wrappers stuffed in the side door pocket. The check engine light was glowing ominously on the dashboard. It was a facade just like his life. Shiny on the outside, rotting on the inside. As we pulled out of the driveway, silence filled the car. It wasn't the comfortable silence of a father and son who understand each other. It was the tense, heavy silence of two strangers with secrets. I stared out the window, watching the neighborhood roll by, but my peripheral vision was locked on Adam. He was driving with one hand, his other hand clutching his phone. Every 30 seconds, the screen would light up with a notification. A text message. An email. A missed call. "Who is calling you so much on a Saturday?" I asked innocently. "Work." Adam jumped slightly as if I had startled him. He quickly flipped the phone face down on the console. Just business, Dad. Wrapping up some projects so I can focus on getting you settled." I knew he was lying. Rick had told me about the debts. The people calling him were not clients. They were sharks. They were the reason he was sweating, despite the air conditioning blasting in the car. I watched a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. His knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel. He was driving too fast, braking too hard. This was a man on the edge of a cliff, and he was terrified of falling. I almost felt a pang of pity for him. Almost. But then I remembered the video. I remembered him laughing while his wife poured poison into my coffee. The pity evaporated, leaving only cold resolve. We hit a red light, and Adam immediately snatched up his phone again. I saw his thumbs flying across the screen, typing furiously. His lips were moving, muttering curses under his breath. He looked frantic. He looked like a trapped animal. "Is everything all right, son?" I asked, pushing the knife in a little deeper. "You seem anxious." He snapped his head toward me, his eyes wide and wild for a split second before he composed himself. "I am fine, Dad. Just stress. You know how it is." "I do," I said softly. "Money troubles can be a heavy burden." The car swerved slightly as he looked at me, a flash of pure panic on his face. What do you mean?" "I just meant, with the economy and all," I continued, keeping my voice steady. "It is hard for everyone these days. That is why I am glad I can help you by signing these papers. The inheritance will help you take care of things." He relaxed, letting out a shaky breath. Yeah, it will. It will solve everything." I looked away, suppressing a smile. He had no idea. He thought the money was his salvation. He did not realize it was the bait in the trap that was about to snap his neck. We arrived at the wine shop. I took my time getting out of the car, leaning heavily on the doorframe. I made him walk with me, made him browse the aisles. I picked up bottles, read the labels, slowly debating the merits of different years. I was buying time. Every minute we spent here was another minute Rick's team had to turn my house into a surveillance state. Adam was vibrating with impatience. "Dad, just pick one. They are all the same." "They are not all the same, Adam," I scolded him gently. "Details matter. Shortcuts lead to mistakes." He didn't catch the double meaning. He just gritted his teeth and nodded. Finally, I selected the bottle. I went to the counter to pay, fumbling with my wallet, dropping a few coins on the floor. Adam sighed loudly, bent down to pick them up, and slapped his credit card on the counter. "I will get it, Dad. Let's just go." The card was declined. The cashier, a young girl with piercings, looked at him apologetically. "I am sorry, sir. It says declined." "Do you have another card?" Adam's face turned a deep shade of crimson. He snatched the card back, muttering about a bank error, about fraud protection flagging a purchase. He pulled out another card. His hand was shaking so badly, he almost dropped it. That one worked. He grabbed the bottle and marched out of the store without waiting for me. I followed him, watching his retreating back. The expensive suit, the confident stride, it was all smoke and mirrors. He was broke. He was desperate. And desperation makes people dangerous. As we drove back to the house, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the road. The golden hour. It was usually my favorite time of day. Today it felt like the countdown clock on a bomb. We pulled into the driveway. The house looked exactly as we had left it. Quiet. Peaceful. But I knew better. I knew that now, hidden behind the crown molding and inside the light fixtures, tiny glass eyes were watching. Microphones were listening. I stepped out of the car, clutching the bottle of wine like a weapon. "Thank you for driving me, Adam," I said. He forced a smile, but it did not reach his eyes. "Anytime, Dad. Let's go inside. Beth should have the chicken in the oven." I walked up the steps to my front door. I was walking back into the cage, but this time I wasn't the prey. I was the hunter, and dinner was about to be served. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, painting stripes of light across the granite countertops. It looked like a beautiful, peaceful Sunday morning in suburbia. But I knew better. I knew that invisible eyes were watching from the smoke detector, and silent ears were listening from the light fixture above the island. I had spent a sleepless night in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house, waiting for the sun to rise on what would be the most difficult day of my life. I walked down the stairs, slowly gripping the banister, with a hand that didn't need to feign its trembling. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. In my ear, a tiny, almost imperceptible piece of technology connected me to the van parked down the street. "Good morning, Tom." Rick's voice whispered in my ear, clear and steady. "We are online. The cameras are live. We see you. Just breathe. You are doing great." I walked into the kitchen. Adam and Beth were already there. The smell of frying bacon and brewing coffee filled the air, a smell that used to mean comfort, family, and lazy weekends. Now it smelled like betrayal. Beth was at the stove flipping pancakes. Adam was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone with that same frantic energy he had yesterday. When he saw me, he shoved the phone into his pocket and plastered on a smile. "Morning, Dad," he said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. "You sleep okay?" I shuffled to the table and sat down, letting out a long, weary sigh. "Not really," I murmured, rubbing my temples. "The dreams, they were bad. And my head, it feels like it is splitting open again." Beth turned from the stove, spatula in hand. "Oh, Tom, I am so sorry. Maybe you should eat something. It will help with the medication." I looked at the food. I couldn't eat. My stomach was tied in knots. "I do not think I can stomach food yet," I said, looking at Adam. "But I really need some coffee. That cup you made yesterday. I never got to drink it because of the excitement. But the smell, I just need something to wake me up. Could you make me a fresh pot?" Son Adam exchanged a quick glance with Beth. It was a subtle, lightning-fast communication. The look said, "This is it, the final dose. Of course, Dad." Adam said, moving toward the coffee maker, "I will make you a special cup. Get you ready for the big dinner tonight." I sat there staring at my hands on the placemat. I could not turn around to watch him. If I did, he might see the terror in my eyes. I had to trust the cameras. I had to trust Rick. "He is reaching for the cabinet," Rick's voice narrated in my ear, cold and professional. "Beth is blocking your view with her body. She is handing him the vial. He is opening it. Okay, we have visual. He is pouring the powder into the filter. He is adding the grounds. We have it, Tom. We have the act on tape." A wave of nausea washed over me. Hearing it happen in real time was 1,000 times worse than watching the old video. My son was standing 5 feet away from me, calmly preparing to end my life. The coffee machine hissed and sputtered. The aroma of dark roast filled the kitchen. It made me want to gag. "Here you go, Dad," Adam said a few minutes later, placing a steaming mug in front of me. "Black, 2 sugars, just how you like it." I looked at the black liquid. It looked perfectly normal. That was the horror of it. It didn't fizz or change color. It just looked like coffee. "Thank you, son," I said, reaching for the mug. My hand was shaking violently. This part wasn't acting. My body was revolting against the idea of touching that cup. I lifted it halfway to my mouth. I saw Adam watching me intently. His eyes were locked on the rim of the mug. He was holding his breath. Rick's voice came back in my ear. "Careful, Tom. Do not drink it." I knew the plan. I had to create a reason for a second cup. I had to watch them to the breaking point. As the mug reached my chin, I let my hand spasm. I jerked my wrist and the heavy ceramic mug slipped from my fingers. It hit the edge of the table with a loud clatter and shattered on the tiled floor. Hot coffee splashed everywhere onto the table legs, onto the floor, onto my slippers. "Oh no," I cried out, shrinking back in my chair. "Oh, I am so clumsy. Look at what I did." Adam's face contorted. For a split second, the mask fell completely. His eyes bulged with pure, unadulterated rage. He looked like he wanted to reach across the table and strangle me. That was the poison. That was his ticket to freedom splattered all over the linoleum. "Jesus Christ, Dad!" He shouted, his hands balling into fists. Adam Beth yelled sharply, stepping in to diffuse the tension. She rushed over with a roll of paper towels. "It is okay. It is just an accident." He did not mean it. I sat there trembling, looking up at my son with wide, fearful eyes. "I am sorry, Adam. My hands, they just stopped working. I am so useless. I am so sorry." Adam took a deep breath, his nostrils flaring. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to compose himself. He knew he couldn't explode. He needed me to sign those papers tonight. He needed me calm. "It is fine, Dad," he gritted out through clenched teeth. "It is just coffee. I will clean it up." He grabbed the paper towels from Beth and started wiping up the mess aggressively. I watched him, feeling a dark satisfaction. I was making him work for his crime. I still need the coffee." "Adam," I stammered, pushing my luck. "My head is pounding so hard. Please, just one more cup. I will hold it with 2 hands this time. I promise." Adam stopped scrubbing. He looked up at me from the floor. I saw the calculation in his eyes. Did he have enough poison left? Was it worth the risk? He stood up, throwing the sodden paper towels into the trash with more force than necessary. "Fine," he said, his voice flat and cold. "One more cup, but be careful this time." He went back to the machine. "He is going back to the vial," Rick whispered in my ear. "He is shaking it. It is the last of it, Tom. He is emptying the whole thing into the filter. He is doubling the dose. He wants to make sure this time." I felt a chill run down my spine. A double dose. He wasn't just trying to make me sick anymore. He was trying to finish me off quickly. The machine gurgled again. The second brewing seemed to take forever. The tension in the kitchen was palpable. Beth was chopping fruit at the counter with sharp staccato movements. Adam was staring at the dripping coffee like a hawk. Finally, he brought the second mug over. He did not set it down this time. He held it out to me, forcing me to take it from his hand. "Here," he said, "drink up. It will make you feel better." I reached out with both hands, clasping the warm mug. I looked into his eyes as I took it. "Thank you, Adam," I said softly. "You always know how to take care of me." I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Shame, no, it was just impatience. Aren't you going to drink it? He asked, watching the steam rise. I brought the cup close to my lips. I smelled the bitter roast. I am, I said. But I think I need to go lie down while I drink it. The noise of the machine, the light in here, it is making my headache worse. I am going to take this upstairs, sip it slowly, and read my book for a while. I will rest up for dinner. Adam hesitated. He wanted to watch me drink it. He wanted to see it go down. But if he argued, it would look suspicious. Why would a son stop his father from resting, okay? He said slowly. But make sure you drink it all, Dad. It is getting cold. I will, I promised. Every drop. I stood up, cradling the mug of liquid death against my chest, like a precious treasure. I walked out of the kitchen, feeling their eyes burning into my back. I climbed the stairs, step by agonizing step. I did not spill a drop. When I reached the landing and turned out of their sight, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for an eternity. I have the package, I whispered into the air. We saw it all, Rick replied, his voice thick with relief. We have the footage, both times. And now you have the physical evidence. Secure it, Tom. Do not let that cup out of your sight. I walked into the bedroom and locked the door. I went to the closet where I had hidden a stainless steel thermos inside my winter coat pocket earlier that morning. I opened the thermos and carefully poured the poisoned coffee into it, sealing it tight. Then I rinsed the mug in the bathroom sink, drying it thoroughly to make it look used. I sat down on the edge of the bed, holding the cold thermos in my hands. Inside this metal cylinder was the proof that would send my son to prison for the rest of his life. I should have felt triumphant. We had done it. We had the trap, the bait, and the catch. But as I sat there in the silence waiting for the sun to go down and the final act to begin, I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a man who had just survived his own execution, only to realize the executioner was the person he loved most in the world. I stared at the thermos. I wasn't drinking the poison, but the toxicity of what had just happened was already coursing through my veins, breaking my heart into pieces that no carpenter could ever fix. The evening air outside was cooling down, but inside the dining room, the heat was stifling. It was not the warmth of a hearth or a home, but the oppressive, sticky heat of anticipation. I had spent the last hour in my bedroom, mentally preparing for this performance, staring at the thermos of poisoned coffee hidden in my closet. Now, as I sat at the head of the mahogany table looking at the roast chicken Beth had prepared, I felt a profound sense of detachment. This was the table where we had celebrated Christmases, birthdays, and graduations. This was the table where Emily and I had held hands and prayed for our son's future. Now it was a crime scene waiting to happen. The chicken smelled exactly like Emily's recipe. Rosemary, lemon, and garlic. It was a cruel mimicry. Beth placed the carving knife down with a sharp clatter that made me flinch, not because I was scared, but because I was acting. I let my hand tremble as I reached for my wine glass, the Pinot Noir swirling like dark blood against the crystal. I took a sip. It tasted like ash. "Thank you, Beth," I said, my voice slurring slightly, just enough to simulate the early stages of confusion. It looks just like she used to make." Beth smiled, but her eyes did not crinkle at the corners. They remained flat and watchful. "I am glad you like it, Tom. We wanted tonight to be special." Adam was already eating, cutting his meat with aggressive, jagged motions. He was not savoring the meal. He was fueling up. He kept glancing at the sideboard where the thick manila envelope lay waiting. The papers. His salvation. My death warrant. I decided to test them one last time. I wanted to see if there was a shred of humanity left in the man sitting to my right. "Do you remember Adam?" I asked, staring at the candle flame. "Do you remember your 10th birthday, the year I built you that treehouse?" Adam sighed, chewing loudly. "Yeah, Dad, I remember. You fell out of it the first week I continued letting a sad smile play on my lips. You broke your arm. You were so scared. You cried for hours. And your mother, she sat up with you all night. She sang to you. She rubbed your back until you fell asleep. She told me later that she would gladly break her own arm 1,000 times over if it meant taking away your pain. I looked at him searching for a reaction, a softening of the jaw, a misty eye, anything. Adam swallowed his food and took a large gulp of wine. That was a long time ago, Dad. Why are you bringing that up now? I have been thinking about love, I said softly, about how much a parent sacrifices, about how we would die for our children. It is a powerful thing, isn't it, that kind of loyalty? Adam put his fork down. The metal scraped against the china. Look, Dad, it is great to reminisce, but we should really focus on the future. We have a lot to get through tonight. The coldness of his response settled in my chest. There it was. The final confirmation. The boy in the treehouse was dead. The man sitting next to me was a stranger who would step over my corpse to get to a bank vault. I let my head drop forward, feigning a wave of dizziness. I groaned low in my throat. Are you okay, Tom? Beth asked, her voice sharp. I do not know, I stammered, blinking rapidly. I feel so heavy. My arms, they feel like lead. And the room is spinning. Maybe that coffee. Maybe it was too strong. I saw them exchange a look. It was a look of pure electric excitement. They thought the double dose was kicking in. They thought I was fading. Adam leaned forward, his voice taking on a predatory urgency. You are just tired, Dad. It has been a long day. Let's just finish up here so you can go rest. You will feel better once everything is signed and settled. I nodded weakly. You are right. I just want to rest. I want to be with Emily. The mention of her name did not even make them flinch. We cleared the plates in silence. I stumbled as I stood up, grabbing the edge of the table for support. Adam was there, instantly gripping my arm. His grip was not supportive. It was controlling. He steered me toward the living room, toward the coffee table where the documents sat like a judgment. Sit here, Dad, he said, pushing me gently into my armchair. Beth brought the papers over. She uncapped a pen, a heavy, expensive fountain pen that I had given Adam for his graduation. The irony was not lost on me. She placed the document in front of me, smoothing out the paper. Just sign right here, she said, pointing to the line marked Grantor. And here, and here. Then we can get you to bed. I looked at the paper. The words swam before my eyes, but I did not need to read them. I knew what they were. They were a confession, a suicide note, a transfer of power. I reached for the pen. My hand shook violently. I let the pen hover over the paper, the nib trembling just millimeters from the surface. I could feel their eyes on me. They were holding their breath. The air in the room was so thick with tension it felt solid. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Tick, tock, tick, tock, counting down the seconds of their freedom. I cannot, I whispered. What? Adam snapped, his patience finally snapping. What do you mean you cannot? I cannot see the line. I lied. It is all blurry. Just sign where my finger is. Adam practically shouted, jabbing his finger onto the paper. Right here, Dad, just do it. I took a deep breath. The time for acting was over. The time for the truth had arrived. I stopped shaking. I let my hand go still. The pen stopped trembling. I sat up straighter in the chair, my spine locking into place. I lifted my head and looked up. I did not look at the paper. I looked directly at Adam. Then I looked at Beth. I let the confusion drain from my face. I let the weakness vanish from my eyes. I replaced it with the cold, hard stare of a man who knows everything. The change was subtle at first, but I saw the moment they noticed it. Adam frowned, confusing, replacing the anger on his face. Beth took a half step back, her hand going to her throat. "Dad," Adam said, his voice wavering slightly. I placed the pen down on the table with a deliberate, slow click. I folded my hands in my lap. "Before I sign," I said, my voice clear, steady, and resonant, devoid of any slur or stutter, "I have one question for you." The silence that followed was terrified. They stared at me, paralyzed by the sudden transformation of the senile old man into the patriarch they used to fear. "What is it?" Adam whispered. I leaned forward, locking eyes with my son. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to see the father he had betrayed. "I want to know," I said, enunciating every syllable. "Did your mother suffer much when you poisoned her?" The reaction was instantaneous and visceral. It was as if I had detonated a bomb in the center of the room. All the color drained from Adam's face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He staggered back as if physically struck, hitting the edge of the sofa. Beth let out a strangled gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. She dropped the folder she was holding, and papers scattered across the floor like white feathers. "What?" Adam choked out, his voice a high-pitched squeak. "What did you say? You heard me," I said, standing up slowly. I did not need the cane. I stood tall, towering over them in my moral judgment. I asked if Emily suffered. Did the arsenic burn her stomach? Did the blood thinners make her feel cold? Did she look at you, Adam, with the same love I did while you were slowly killing her? Adam's eyes darted around the room, wild and frantic. He looked at the window. He looked at the door. He looked at the coffee cup I had left in the kitchen. You are crazy," he stammered, sweat breaking out instantly on his forehead. "You are senile. You do not know what you are talking about. Do I not?" I asked, my voice rising. "I know about the gambling debts, Adam. $2 million. I know about the embezzlement from Griffin's company. I know about the arsenic in the toxicology report. And I know about the double dose of poison you put in my coffee this morning." Beth began to hyperventilate, backing away until she hit the wall. How she wheezed. "How do you know?" "Because I did not drink it, Beth," I said, turning my gaze to her. "I poured it into a thermos. It is upstairs right now. Evidence. Just like the video of you putting the powder in the filter 3 weeks ago. Just like the video of you doing it again this morning." Adam looked at me with pure horror. The realization crashed over him. The old man wasn't the prey. The old man was the trap. You have been watching us," he whispered. "I have been watching you turn into monsters," I said, "and now I am watching you fall." Adam's face twisted. The fear was replaced by a sudden, desperate violence. He realized there was no way out. No explanation. No lie that could cover this. He looked at the papers on the floor, then he looked at me. He lunged. He came at me with a guttural roar, his hands reaching for my throat. He was younger, stronger, and fueled by the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. But he never reached me. Before his fingers could graze my skin. The front door burst open, with a crash that shook the entire house. The back door shattered inward at the same moment. "Police, get on the ground!" The shout filled the room, accompanied by the heavy thud of boots and the blinding beams of tactical flashlights. Rick Sanchez was the first one through the door, his gun drawn, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. Griffin was right behind him. Adam froze mid-lunge, his eyes wide, blinded by the lights. "It is over, Adam," I said, not moving an inch. And as the police swarmed the room, tackling my son to the ground, I did not look away. I watched him hit this floor. I watched the handcuffs click. I watched the dynasty he thought he was stealing dissolve into dust. I stood in the wreckage of my family, alone but alive, while the ghosts of my house finally stopped screaming. The sudden explosion of noise and light in my living room was disorienting, like a thunderclap striking inside the house. For a split-second, time seemed to suspend. I saw Adam frozen in mid-air, his face a mask of primal rage that was rapidly dissolving into terror. I saw Beth backed against the wall, her mouth open in a silent scream, and I saw the heavy wooden door, the one I had sanded and varnished myself 30 years ago, splintering off its hinges as the tactical team poured in. "Police, show me your hands! Get on the ground!" Now the commands were barked with a ferocity that left no room for hesitation. Adam didn't even have time to lower his arms. 2 officers in tactical gear tackled him, their momentum driving him hard into the Persian rug. The wind was knocked out of him with a sickening thud, followed immediately by the harsh metallic ratchet of handcuffs being cinched tight behind his back. I stood there, unmoving, like a statue in the center of a hurricane. I watched my son, the boy I had once carried on my shoulders, so he could see the fireworks on the 4th of July, now pressing his face into the wool fibers of the rug, grunting in pain and confusion. It was a sight that should have broken me. It should have made me fall to my knees and beg them to stop. But the man watching was not just a father anymore. I was a survivor, and I was looking at the predator who had tried to consume me. Beth was hysterical. When an officer approached her, she began to shriek a high, piercing sound that grated on my nerves. "Do not touch me. I did not do anything. This is a mistake. He is crazy. The old man is crazy." Rick Sanchez stepped through the wreckage of the doorway, stepping over the splintered wood with a calm, grim determination. He wasn't looking at the police or the screaming woman. He was looking at me. He walked straight to the table where the thermos of poisoned coffee sat, the thermos I had brought down from the bedroom and placed there as the silent witness to their crime. He picked it up with a gloved hand, holding it aloft like a lantern in the darkness. "It is over," Beth, Rick said, his voice cutting through her hysteria. "We have the video, we have the audio, and we have this." He tapped the side of the stainless steel thermos. "We watched you brew it." Rick continued, his tone devoid of pity. "We watched you hand it to him. And we have the lab results from the first batch. Attempted murder, conspiracy. And once the autopsy results on Emily come back, we will be adding murder in the 1st degree." Beth stopped screaming. The blood drained from her face so completely that she looked like a corpse. She slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor, her expensive dress bunching up around her knees. An officer pulled her hands behind her back, and I heard the second click of handcuffs. Griffin Thorne entered the room then. He looked shaken, his face pale in the harsh glare of the tactical lights. He looked at Adam on the floor, then at me. He walked over and stood beside me, a silent pillar of support. He didn't say anything, but his presence was enough. It was a reminder that while I had lost my blood family, I still had people who valued my life. Adam twisted his head around, trying to look up at me from the floor. His cheek was pressed against the rug, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild and red-rimmed. "Dad," he gasped, his voice cracking. "Dad, please, tell them it is a misunderstanding. I am your son. You cannot let them take me." I looked down at him. I remembered the day he was born. I remembered counting his toes. I remembered the overwhelming wave of love that had washed over me, a promise that I would kill for this boy, that I would die for this boy. And I realized with a cold, hollow ache in my chest that I had kept that promise. I had been willing to die for him. I had almost let him kill me because I couldn't believe he was capable of evil. But looking at him now, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger with my eyes and my nose, but with a soul that had been rotted away by greed. I took a slow, painful step toward him. The police officers stepped back slightly, giving me space, respecting the gravity of the moment. I knelt down on one knee, ignoring the protest of my old joints, until my face was just inches from his. "I did not raise you to be this," I said, my voice quiet but steady. carrying the weight of a lifetime of fatherhood. I taught you to build things, Adam. I taught you that wood has a grain, and if you go against it, it splinters. I taught you that a man is only as good as his word. Adam began to sob. It wasn't the crying of a remorseful man. It was the terrified weeping of a child who has been caught and knows there is no way out. I needed the money, Dad, he choked out. They were going to kill me. You do not understand. The debts. They were going to kill me. So you decided to kill me instead, I asked. You decided that my life and your mother's life were the currency you would use to buy your safety. He didn't answer. He just squeezed his eyes shut, tears leaking out and wetting the rug. I reached out my hand, hovering over his head for a moment. The instinct to comfort him was still there, buried deep in my DNA. But I pulled my hand back. I could not comfort the man who had murdered my wife. I did not give birth to monsters, Adam, I whispered, standing up slowly. I gave birth to a boy. But you let greed turn you into a monster. And monsters do not get to live in my house. I turned away from him. Take him away, I said to the officers. No, Dad. No, Adam screamed as they hauled him to his feet. I did not look back. I walked to the window and stared out into the dark night. I heard the scuffle of feet, the sound of the front door opening, and the heavy thud of car doors slamming. I saw the red and blue lights flashing against the trees in the front yard, illuminating the neighborhood in a chaotic strobe light rhythm. The house fell silent, save for the crackle of police radios and the low murmur of Rick and Griffin talking to the lead detective. I stood there feeling the adrenaline drain out of me, leaving behind an exhaustion so profound it felt like my bones were dissolving. Rick walked over to me. He still held the thermos in a plastic evidence bag. We have everything we need, Tom, he said softly. They will not be getting out. The video is damning. And with this coffee, the toxicology will match the previous samples perfectly. It is a slam dunk. I nodded, staring at my reflection in the window glass. I looked older than I had yesterday. The lines on my face seemed deeper. My eyes looked haunted. What happens now? I asked. Now Rick said we go to the station. We make your formal statement. And then you try to heal. Heal. The word sounded foreign, impossible. How do you heal when the wound is your own flesh and blood? How do you heal when the person who cut you is the person you spent your life protecting? I turned back to the room. It was a mess. Papers were scattered everywhere. The fake suicide note, the power of attorney, the deed transfer. The remnants of a plot to erase me. I walked over and picked up the fountain pen Beth had tried to make me use. It was heavy, gold-plated. I remembered the pride in Adam's eyes when I gave it to him. I walked to the fireplace. There was no fire burning, just cold ash. I tossed the pen into the grate. I am ready, I said to Griffin and Rick. Let's go. I walked out of my house, past the broken door, past the neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalk, whispering and pointing. I walked with my head high. I was not the victim here. I was the witness. I was the survivor. And as I climbed into the back of the police cruiser to be taken to the station, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The worst had happened. The betrayal was absolute. But I was still standing. My heart was broken, yes, but my dignity was intact. And in a world where my own son would sell me for parts, dignity was the only treasure I had left to protect. The interrogation room was cold and smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, but it was the office of my new attorney, Ms. Nina Ramirez, where the true chill set in. It was 3 days after the police had swarmed my home, 3 days since I watched my son being dragged away in handcuffs. I had spent those days in a haze of interviews, medical checkups, and sleepless nights in a hotel room provided by the district attorney. I could not go back to the house. Not yet. It was still a crime scene wrapped in yellow tape, a monument to the family I thought I had. Nina sat across from me at a wide glass desk. She was a sharp woman, efficient and kind, but today her face was pale. She looked like she was holding a physical weight, something heavy and radioactive. Next to her sat Griffin Thorne, who had refused to leave my side through this entire ordeal. Tom, Nina began, her voice soft but serious. We need to show you something. When the police searched the house, they confiscated the folder Adam and Beth were trying to force you to sign. I nodded slowly. The power of attorney, I said. They wanted control of the assets. They wanted to sell the house and put me in a home. Nina exchanged a dark look with Griffin. She slid a document across the desk toward me. It was inside a plastic evidence sleeve. It was not a power of attorney, Tom, she said. Read it. I looked down at the paper. It was typed on plain white paper, no legal letterhead. At the bottom, there was a single line for a signature. My signature. I began to read. To whom it may concern, I, Thomas Harrison, being of sound mind, write this confession to clear my conscience before I take my own life. I can no longer live with the guilt of what I have done. For the past 6 months, I have been slowly poisoning my wife, Emily. I did it because I was jealous. I did it because I was tired of her controlling nature. I slipped the arsenic into her food. I watched her fade away, and I felt nothing but relief. But now that she is gone, the ghosts are haunting me. I cannot sleep. I cannot eat. I realize now that I am a monster. I do not deserve to live. I have decided to end my suffering the same way I ended hers. My breath caught in my throat. I read the next paragraph. I leave all my worldly possessions, my home, my savings, and the insurance payouts to my beloved son Adam and his wife Beth. They are innocent in this. They tried to help me, but I was too far gone. Please do not investigate them. They are the only light in my dark world. Goodbye. I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the desk like a dead leaf. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I wrapped my arms around my stomach, physically sickened. They were going to frame me, I whispered, my voice trembling with horror. Griffin leaned forward, his eyes burning with anger. It was the perfect crime, Tom. If you had drunk that coffee, you would have died of a heart attack or an overdose. The police would have found your body. And right next to it, they would have found this note. Nina tapped the document. Think about it. The autopsy on Emily is coming back with high levels of arsenic. The police would have opened a homicide investigation. Suspicion might have fallen on the people who had access to her, you, Adam, Beth. But this note wraps it all up in a neat little bow. I stared at the wall, seeing the entire diabolical plan unfold in my mind. They weren't just going to kill me. They were going to murder my reputation. They were going to destroy my legacy. I would have gone down in history, not as the grieving husband, but as the jealous, demented wife killer who took the coward's way out. Emily's memory would have been tainted by the lie that her husband murdered her. Adam would have played the grieving orphan weeping at the funeral of the parents who tragically destroyed each other. Why, I asked, tears streaming down my face. Why go to such lengths? Why destroy my name? Rick Sanchez entered the room then. He had been out following the money trail. He looked exhausted, but he held a file in his hand. Because they needed the case closed immediately, Rick said, sitting down next to me. He opened the file and spread out bank records and grainy surveillance photos of Adam meeting with men in the back of a dimly lit club. We found the motive, Tom. It is not just gambling debt. It is who he owes the money to. Rick pointed to a photo of a man with a scar running down his cheek. This is Victor. He runs a loan shark operation out of the shipping yards. Adam didn't just borrow money for poker. He borrowed money to try and save his failing business. Then he gambled to try and pay it back. He is in the hole for $2.3 million. $2 million, I whispered. Rick nodded. And these aren't the kind of people who send you a late notice. They gave Adam a deadline, end of the month. Or they were going to kill him, and they were going to kill Beth. I looked at the dates on the bank statements. The deadline was in 2 days. Nina picked up the thread. That is why they were so desperate. That is why they couldn't wait for probate. That is why they couldn't risk a long police investigation into Emily's death. If the police were sniffing around, the insurance company would freeze the payout. Adam needed that money now. By framing you, Griffin added, his voice low and disgusted. They achieved 2 things. First, they got the life insurance money from both you and Emily immediately, because the killer was dead and the case was closed. Second, they inherited the house and the savings instantly as the sole survivors. They needed you to be the villain so they could be the beneficiaries. I sat back in the chair, feeling a cold numbness spreading through my limbs. My son was being hunted. He was terrified. I could understand fear. I could understand desperation. But instead of coming to me, instead of asking his father for help, he decided to sacrifice me. He decided to turn me into a murderer in the eyes of the world to save his own skin. He was going to let me die thinking I was a monster, I said softly. No, Nina corrected gently. He was going to let the world think you were a monster. But you knew the truth. And now we all know the truth. I looked at the fake suicide note again. I saw the line where Adam had tried to force my hand. Just sign here, Dad. It is just a standard form. If I had signed that, if I hadn't seen the shaking in his hands, if I hadn't heard the whisper at the funeral, I would be dead, I said, and everyone I ever knew would hate me. Nina gathered the papers back into the file. But you didn't sign it, Tom. And this piece of paper is the final nail in their coffin. It proves premeditation. It proves malice. It proves that this wasn't a crime of passion. It was a cold, calculated execution. I stood up and walked to the window of the office. Below, the city was moving on. People were walking to work, buying coffee, living their lives. They had no idea that in a quiet office above them, a man was looking at the wreckage of his entire existence. I thought about Adam. I thought about the fear he must have felt with the loan sharks breathing down his neck. But then I thought about Emily. I thought about her drinking that tea, trusting her son, while the poison slowly shut down her heart. He had a choice, I said to the reflection in the glass. He could have come to me. I would have sold the house. I would have sold the workshop. I would have given him everything I had to pay off those debts. I would have saved him. Griffin came up beside me. I know you would have, Tom. But he didn't ask, I whispered. He didn't want my help. He wanted my death. I turned back to them. The tears were gone. In their place was a resolve harder than oak. Give the note to the district attorney, I said. Give them everything. I want the world to know what he did. I want Emily's name cleared. And I want to make sure that he never, ever hurts anyone again. Nina nodded. We will. The arraignment is tomorrow. They are being charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. 1 actual, 1 attempted. And with this note, plus the debt records, we have motive, means, and opportunity. They are never getting out, Tom. I looked at the empty chair where my son should have been sitting, asking for forgiveness. Good, I said. Because the son I loved died a long time ago. The man in that cell is just a stranger who owes a debt, and this time he is going to pay it with his life. 6 months is a long time to wait for justice, but it goes by in a blink when you are preparing to send your own blood to prison. The seasons had changed outside the courthouse walls. The winter chill that had surrounded Emily's funeral had given way to a bright, indifferent summer. But inside the courtroom, the air remained cold and sterile. I sat on the hard wooden bench in the front row, smoothing the fabric of my dark suit. It was the same suit I had worn to bury my wife, but the man wearing it was different. The poison was gone from my blood. The fog had lifted from my mind, and the broken heart I had nursed in the darkness of my home had calcified into something harder, something that beat with the steady rhythm of duty rather than love. When the bailiff called my name, I stood up. I did not need a cane. I did not stumble. I walked to the witness stand with the stride of a man who has nothing left to hide and nothing left to fear. I placed my hand on the Bible, the same book I had read to Adam from when he was a boy, and I swore to tell the truth. As I sat down, I finally allowed myself to look at the defense table. Adam and Beth were sitting there. Prison had not been kind to them. The expensive suits and manicured looks were gone. Adam looked gaunt, his skin sallow, his posture defeated. He was wearing an ill-fitting gray suit provided by his public defender. Beth looked small, her hair dull, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. When Adam met my gaze, I saw a flicker of hope. He was looking for his father. He was looking for the man who used to fix his toys and pay his debts. But that man was not on the witness stand. The witness was Thomas Harrison, a citizen, a widower, and a survivor of attempted murder. Mr. Harrison, the district attorney, began, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Can you tell the jury what happened on the morning of March 14th? I leaned into the microphone. My voice was deep and steady, filling the silence. That was the morning my son tried to finish what he started, I said. That was the morning he served me a second dose of arsenic and warfarin, believing I was too senile to notice. The defense attorney tried to object, but I kept talking. I looked directly at the jury. 12 strangers who held the fate of my family in their hands. He handed me a cup of death, I continued. He smiled when he did it. He told me it would make me feel better, just like he told his mother that the vitamins he gave her would help her recover. Adam flinched as if I had struck him. He looked down at the table, unable to hold my gaze. For 3 hours I answered questions. I recounted the months of illness, the confusion, the headaches. I described the discovery of the embezzlement. I explained the fake suicide note they had drafted, forcing the jury to look at the cold, premeditated nature of their plan. I was not emotional. I did not cry. I laid out the facts like I was laying bricks for a foundation, solid, undeniable, and permanent. The prosecutor played the video. The courtroom screens flickered to life, showing the black and white footage of my kitchen. The silence in the room was absolute as everyone watched Beth pour the powder. They watched Adam laugh. They watched the domestic normalcy of evil. When the video ended, the prosecutor asked me one final question. Mr. Harrison, why do you think they did this? I looked at Adam. I wanted him to hear this. Because they loved money more than they loved people, I said. Because they thought I was weak. They thought I was just a clueless old man who had served his purpose. They forgot that before I was a father, I was a man who built things to last. And I will not let them tear down my wife's memory for a gambling debt. The trial lasted 2 weeks, but the verdict took only 4 hours. I was sitting in the gallery when the jury foreman stood up. Adam was gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Beth was trembling, tears streaming down her face, whispering a prayer she had no right to pray. We, the jury, find the defendant, Adam Harrison, guilty of murder in the first degree and attempted murder in the first degree. We, the jury, find the defendant, Beth Harrison, guilty of murder in the first degree and conspiracy to commit murder. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. The judge's gavel banged down, sounding like the closing of a coffin lid. He looked at them with zero sympathy. Given the heinous nature of these crimes, the betrayal of trust, and the predatory targeting of vulnerable family members, I am sentencing you both to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Beth screamed. It was a raw, ugly sound. She collapsed into her chair, sobbing about how it wasn't fair. Adam did not scream. He just slumped forward, his head hitting the table. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I watched the bailiffs move in to take them away. They hauled Adam up. He looked broken. He looked young again, like the boy who used to come to me when he had nightmares. He turned his head as they led him toward the side door. He found me in the crowd. "Dad," he mouthed. He didn't ask for help this time. He just said the word, acknowledging the bond he had severed. I looked at him. I did not look away. I did not offer him a smile of forgiveness, nor did I give him a scowl of hatred. I just looked at him with the neutral, distant gaze of a stranger. I was witnessing the funeral of my son. The physical body was still walking, but the person I loved was gone. As the heavy door buzzed open and the bailiff pushed him through, Adam looked back one last time. The door slammed shut, cutting off his view of the free world forever. I felt a sudden sharp sting in my right eye. I reached up and touched my cheek. A single tear had escaped. I looked at it on my finger. It was not a tear of pity. He deserved every day of the sentence he had received. He had killed Emily. He had tried to kill me. He was a monster of his own making. No, this tear was for the past. It was for the memory of the treehouse. It was for the fishing trips. It was for the potential that had been wasted. It was a goodbye to the illusion of the perfect family I thought I had built. I wiped the tear away with my thumb. It dried quickly. "Mr. Harrison," I turned. It was Griffin. He was standing at the end of the aisle looking at me with concern. "Are you okay, Tom?" I took a deep breath. The air in the courtroom tasted different now. It tasted clean. The weight that had been crushing my chest for 6 months was gone. "I am," I said, and for the first time in a long time I meant it. I walked out of the courtroom, my steps echoing on the marble floor. I pushed open the double doors and stepped out into the summer afternoon. The sun was blindingly bright. The city noise washed over me, traffic voices, life. I was 70 years old. I was alone. I had no wife. I had no child. But as I stood there on the courthouse steps, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, I realized I had something else. I had my life. I had my truth. And I had a future that was finally completely mine. The nightmare was over. It was time to wake up and live. The day I put the for sale sign on the front lawn of the house, I felt the first true breath of air fill my lungs in months. It was not a surrender. It was a liberation. For 45 years, that house had been my pride, the physical manifestation of my hard work and my love for my family. But now, walking through the empty rooms, listening to the echo of my own footsteps on the hardwood floors I had laid myself, I realized it was no longer a home. It was a mausoleum of memories that had been poisoned. The kitchen where we had shared meals was now the scene of a crime. The dining room where we had celebrated holidays was where my son had tried to manipulate me into signing my life away. I did not want to live in a museum of betrayal. I hired a moving company to take only the things that mattered. Emily's books, her favorite armchair, the photo albums from before the rot set in. Everything else, the furniture, the appliances, the heavy oak table, I left behind. I sold the house to a young couple with a baby on the way. When I handed them the keys, I saw the excitement in their eyes, and I prayed that their walls would absorb new, happier memories, burying the darkness that Adam and Beth had brought into them. Selling the workshop was harder. That space smelled of sawdust and varnish, the sense of my life's purpose. It was where I had taught Adam to hold a hammer. It was where I had built the crib he slept in. I stood in the center of the dusty room, running my hand over the worn surface of my workbench. I picked up a chisel, feeling the weight of the steel and the smoothness of the wooden handle. These tools had built beautiful things, but they could not fix what was broken in my son. I sold the equipment to a local trade school, hoping that the next generation of carpenters would learn not just the craft, but the integrity that goes with it. As I locked the heavy metal doors for the last time, I did not look back. I was 70 years old, and I was starting over with nothing but a suitcase and a clear conscience. Griffin Thorne did not let me fade away into obscurity. He became more than just my wife's boss. He became the brother I never had. We channeled our shared grief and anger into something constructive. We used a portion of Emily's insurance money and the funds from the sale of the house to establish the Emily Harrison Foundation. We rented a small office downtown not far from the building where Griffin and Rick had saved my life. Our mission was simple but vital. We wanted to provide legal and financial protection for the elderly. We wanted to be the shield for those whose families had become their predators. Every day I went to that office. I answered phones. I listened to the stories of men and women who were being coerced, manipulated, and drained dry by their own children. I heard my own story reflected in their trembling voices. I told them they were not crazy. I told them they were not burdens. I told them that they had rights. We hired Nina Ramirez as our lead counsel, and together we fought for them. We helped them rewrite wills, secure their assets, and find safe housing. Every time we saved someone from losing their dignity, I felt like I was saving Emily all over again. I was building a new legacy, one not made of wood and stone, but of justice and compassion. It was work that healed the hole in my chest. It gave me a reason to wake up in the morning, a reason to put on a tie, a reason to keep living. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year after the nightmare began, I drove out to the cemetery. The leaves were turning gold and crimson, blazing against the gray sky. I walked up the winding path to the hill where Emily rested. I did not bring roses this time. I brought lilies, her favorite. I knelt on the grass, the damp earth seeping into the knees of my trousers. The headstone was simple, just her name and the dates. I traced the letters with my finger. "I did it, Em," I whispered to the silence. I stopped them. They can never hurt anyone again. A gentle breeze rustled the trees, sounding like a sigh of relief. I sat there for a long time talking to her. I told her about the foundation. I told her about the young couple who bought our house. I told her that I missed her every single second of every single day, but that I was okay. I was really, truly okay. I thought about Adam sitting in his cell. I wondered if he thought about us. I wondered if he regretted his actions or if he only regretted getting caught. But as I sat there, I realized that I no longer needed to know the answer. His choices were his own. His fate was his own. I had released the burden of his guilt. I was no longer the father of a murderer. I was Thomas Harrison. I was a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side without being consumed. I looked out over the cemetery at the rows of stones marking lives lived and lost. I was old. I was alone in the traditional sense. I had no wife to cook dinner for no son to call on Sundays. But I did not feel lonely. I felt a profound, quiet freedom. I was safe. I slept soundly at night without fear of what was in my drink. I walked down the street with my head held high. I had protected my dignity. I had honored my wife. And I had discovered a truth that many people spend their whole lives searching for but never find. Family is not just blood. Blood is biology. It is an accident of birth. True family is respect. It is loyalty. It is the people who stand by you when the world is falling apart. It is Griffin who risked everything to warn me. It is Rick who fought for a stranger. It is Nina who gave me a voice. And it is the memory of the woman who loved me enough to save me from beyond the grave. When blood becomes poison, when the people who are supposed to nurture you start to feed on you, you have to cut the limb to save the body. It is the hardest thing a human being can do to sever the tie with their own child. But sometimes it is the only way to survive. I stood up, brushing the grass from my pants. I touched the top of the headstone one last time. "Rest well, my love," I said. "I will see you when my work here is done." I walked back down the hill, the sun breaking through the clouds and warming my back. I got into my car and drove away, leaving the dead to the dead and driving toward the living. My life was different now. It was smaller, quieter, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead looked clear. This story is a warning, but it is also a promise. It is a promise that no matter how old you are, no matter how betrayed you feel, you are never powerless. You have a voice, you have rights, and you have the strength to redefine what family means to you. If you are watching this and you feel that knot of fear in your stomach, when you look at the people you live with, listen to it. Trust your gut. You are worth protecting. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives you the courage to face whatever battles you are fighting. Here's a lesson I learned from this painful journey. Trust is a beautiful thing, but it should never be blind. The most dangerous betrayals often come from the places we least expect, our own homes. We are taught that family is sacred, that parents and children have an unbreakable bond. But love is an action, not just a title. When someone, no matter who they are, shows you through their actions that they value your assets more than your life, believe them. Do not let nostalgia cloud your judgment. Protect yourself, protect your peace, and remember that you have the right to be safe even from your own blood. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. You never know whose life you might change just by sharing a story. And tell me in the comments, do you believe that blood is always thicker than water? Or do you believe that family is what you make it? I read every single comment, and I want to know your thoughts. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never be afraid to stand up for yourself.